President Trump is now considering getting rid of the income tax. Take a listen.
Getting rid of the income tax and abolishing the IRS. Man, that sounds crazy. I'm curious just to see what they're even talking about here. So let's tap in.
In my speech last week, instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens.
At first, I kind of thought this was a joke, but Congress is taking it seriously. The Fair Tax Act of 2025 was a bill proposed which would effectively abolish the IRS. And if you still don't...
Nah, that's crazy. That's crazy because you know people don't pay on time and all that, and you already know if you don't pay, they're gonna come after you. Eventually, it doesn't matter how small the amount. Crazy. So, I mean, if this plan actually goes through, that would be wild.
One sentence from the bill's press release. The fair tax would also eliminate the need for the Internal Revenue Service. Now, you're probably wondering, if the government decides to cancel your income tax, how do they get money? Which might explain why Trump is also...
Yeah, what do you have to pay then?
The ERS, the External Revenue Service, as a new entity to collect tariffs. That's why in this video, I want to talk about taxes. Not from a political perspective, but from a financial perspective, because as a licensed attorney who's not your attorney, who keeps a copy of the Federal Income Tax Code in his office, which is, by the way, a 2,000-page book with 8 or 10-point font, I can tell you that taxes are very confusing, and they might get even more confusing. And so I want to break this down by talking about 3 things. Number 1, I want you to really understand how our tax system works today, that we can understand how tariffs flow into it. Number 2, I want to talk about tariffs as a potential replacement for the income tax. What does that look like? Is it
Nah, I
possible?
wonder if this means
then
that
number 3,
people
I wanna
wouldn't
talk
pay
about, well, what would the
taxes at all.
consequence of that be? Would it make the inflation problem worse or not? Which is why I want you to really stick with me.
Because you know, a lot of times, man, it's like 50% of your income. Crazy.
Big picture. This is a very rough drawing of how our tax system works. This is you. For my male followers, I drew a mustache, which in my native language Punjabi is a much. For my female followers, I drew a braid, which in my native language Punjabi is called a gut. You pay the government taxes. I'll explain how and why you pay the government taxes in just a second, but you pay the government taxes, and then when the government collects this tax revenue, they can go out and spend this tax money. Now, you might think that if the government collects $100 in taxes, that they can only spend $80 out of the 100, or maybe max $100 because that's all they have. But that's not true, because if the government wants to spend money that they don't have, which is what they've been doing, then what they do is they go out and borrow that money, which is why we're seeing a record high amount of national debt today, which means
the debt is
you
crazy.
pay taxes to the government goes out and spends all of your taxes and then some with the help of debt. Now you might be wondering, well, what are you paying taxes on exactly? Here's a rough list of 10 different buckets of taxes that you might be paying. Number 1 is your income taxes. You go to work to make money. Well, some of that money is going to go in the form of income taxes because you just...
I know I can't be the only one that feels like you get taxed on every single little thing. Even when you spend it, you make profit, you get it back. Every single thing is so crazy.
The government wants their fair share. Number 2 is payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are on top of your income taxes, which is when you get a salary, you have to pay FICA taxes. This is Social Security and Medicare taxes, which is paid by you and your employer. If you're self-employed, you have to pay both ends of it, so you have to pay double the payroll taxes, but this is paid on top of your income taxes. Number 3 is capital gains taxes. If you go out and buy a stock and you sell it for profit, you have to pay taxes on that. That's called capital gains taxes. Number 4 are corporate taxes. If you run a C corporation, you run a big corporation and you make profits, the corporation has to pay taxes in addition to the people that are actually getting the money. Number 5 are property taxes. You buy a house, you got to pay taxes every year, which is called your property tax. Number 6 is called your estate tax.
That list just keeps going on and on.
Tax, which is when you die, if you pass money down to your kids, you have to pay taxes on that. Now, not everybody's going to have to pay taxes. This is really just reserved for the wealthy. As of 2025, the limit is you have to pass down more than $13.99 million before you have to worry about this estate tax. But if you're passing down huge sums of wealth, you also have to worry about this estate or death tax. Number 7 are sales taxes. You go to the store and buy things, you got to pay sales taxes. Number 8 are sin taxes. These are taxes put on things like cigarettes. If the government doesn't like it, like lottery, well then they'll put a tax on it as a way for the government to make some more money as well. Number 9 are tariffs, which we already know, and I'm going to go deeper into tariffs. And then number 10 are other. I just kind of lumped everything else here because there are
this is
other
crazy.
types of taxes.
Literally
as well.
every
For example,
single place
toll taxes. For
you gotta
example,
pay.
sometimes you might see hotel taxes. So there are a lot of different types of taxes out there. And what President Trump is trying to propose, and what it seems like it's proposing, is saying, hey, let's take this category of tax right here, this income tax, which everybody who has a job has to worry about. Let's get rid of that, and let's replace that by increasing this tax right here, tariffs from goods from other countries. So now that we all have a foundation of how our tax system works, where the government
just
is
to
going to
replace it like that,
and then they're going to spend all that money and then some with the help of debt.
That'd be crazy.
Let's now talk about, could we actually feasibly use tariffs as a replacement for the income tax? Now, I do want to let you know that if you're an investor and you like to stay up to date on what's happening in things like the economy and things like the stock market and things like the housing market, the crypto market, and the global economy, my team at Briefs that are below. Income taxes. Before, the IRS collected about $5.1 trillion in income taxes.
Get into a bag.
Out of the $5.1 trillion that they collected,
I think what aggravates people too is a lot of times that's not going towards things that you actually find useful or believe it should go towards, right? It's pretty much they take it out and spend it how they want. Now, ideally, you're helping people,
a little
but
bit over $500 billion in the form of tax refunds and credits. So let's just say, we'll call it that the government collected around $4.5 trillion in the form of income taxes. Now, I know I'm just a random guy on YouTube, but if I did some basic math, if you want to get rid of the income tax, I think that you'd have to collect an additional $4.5 trillion in the form of tariffs in order to negate that. So I did a little bit of digging, and according to the United States Customs and Border Protection website, here's what I found. There were about $3.35 trillion of goods imported into the United States in 2022, of which generated around $111 billion in tariffs. Now, I know that was based off of 2022 numbers, but that's the best data that we have from the government agencies themselves. But if we take a look at the 2022 numbers, that means, in theory, the government would have to impose something like a 130% tariff on all imported goods into the United States in order to generate $4.5 trillion based off of the $3 trillion or so that was brought in or imported into the United States in 2022.
That's crazy.
Which doesn't seem very feasible. Not to mention the fact that the goal of tariffs is to bring some manufacturing back to the United States, which might have you thinking, if we slap on big tariffs and some more manufacturing,
don't people not want to manufacture?
States,
yeah,
we might have even less imported goods because less goods are being made overseas. So if less goods are being made overseas, more goods are being made here, less goods are being imported, that means less tariffs are being collected. So based off of the 2022 numbers, to just rely on tariffs to offset the income tax seems very difficult unless, of course, the government cuts down their spending as well. Part of the reason why the government needs such high income taxes is because they spend a lot of money. Not only do they spend a lot of money, they're spending a whole lot more money than what they even have. So maybe the government could cut back their expenses drastically, and then they could generate less dollars from tariffs, eliminate the income tax, and then be okay because, well, we need less dollars. But you can start to see how that becomes a little bit difficult. But let's go a little bit deeper. Based off of the data that we have today, it seems very unlikely that tariffs would serve as a complete replacement for the income tax.
So I wonder if one will rise and then the other.
Potentially reduce income taxes, but completely replacing income taxes, just based off of the numbers that we have today, doesn't seem very likely. But let's continue down this rabbit hole. If tariffs were to get passed, and we were to potentially reduce income taxes as a byproduct of these tariffs, what would be the consequence of that? Could we be looking at potentially higher inflation? Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. It's very easy to understand how tariffs could make...
It's crazy because people always say, and you know, like inflation is already going up like crazy. So if it's going to happen even more, man, I can't imagine what things would look like.
Expensive. Give you a quick example. Let's assume that I sell shoes, and I sell this very ugly shoe that I drew for...
Especially, and the easiest example for probably anyone is just, man, you think haircuts in general. Before COVID, you know, $20, something not too crazy. After that, man, they're taxing like crazy. So
$100 at retail price. Now, if I manufacture the shoe in China, I'm not paying $100 for the shoe. Let's just say I'm paying $50 to get this shoe manufactured in China, theoretical example. Now, if there is a brand new 20% tariff that's slapped onto goods from China, that means now my cost on this is not going to be $50, my cost is going to be $60. Now, I have a few options. I could eat up this profit margin and take that hit if I wanted to, Or I could pass down this $20 cost, and now instead of selling it for $100, I could sell it to consumers for $120. This is one way that the prices of things can go up, and it's pretty obvious. So yes, could this raise the price to $120 or $110 or $105 to make up for this higher cost? Sure. But you also have some economists that say that tariffs will not make the prices of things more expensive. For example, the Economics Policy Institute in 2022 published a study saying that tariffs on steel did not cause the prices of steel to go up. Now, if you don't know the history of this, back in Trump's first term in 2018, he passed a 25% tariff on steel entering the United States. And the question ultimately is then what happened to the price of steel after those tariffs were imposed? Take a look. The steel tariffs were passed in March of 2018, which is where this line is right here. And what you can see is after the tariffs were passed, steel prices actually went up a little bit until September 2018. But then after that, steel prices actually fell, and they actually became cheaper than where they were before the tariffs until the pandemic hit, and then steel prices skyrocketed. This is why there's so much uncertainty as to what's going to happen with inflation if and when tariffs get passed, because number one, there's a chance that tariffs could make the price of things go up because of this. There's a chance that...
It almost seems too like it's just a jigsaw puzzle, because it's like, man, you move one thing and it just feels like the price is going to go up of other things, and it's not going to change that much.
Tariffs could not make the prices of things go up because people eat up their cost. And we also don't know which countries would see the tariffs. We don't know what extent the tariffs would be. We don't know what retaliation we would see. And we also don't know how sweeping the tariffs would be into how many different goods, how many different industries. That's why it's so uncertain as to whether the inflation issue would get worse with tariffs, if it would stay the same, or if it could potentially get better. Not to mention the fact that this is where Trump has also kind of hinted that, hey, if we can pass some tariffs, well, then we can also pass some tax savings onto you. Which means, in theory, if you were to see lower income taxes, and then maybe you paid a little bit more money for your stuff at the grocery store, it could potentially still end up as a net positive, depending on how much you consume. Because if we see higher tariffs, well, that really then becomes more of a consumption tax, because then this tariff ultimately gets passed down to how much things you buy. If you're not buying the things with tariffs, then the prices of those things may not go up, and you may not feel that impact onto you. So this is where, again, uncertainty. We don't know what will see tariffs. We don't know which countries
this is
will see
crazy.
tariffs. We don't know to what extent tariffs will be, meaning how high the tariffs will be, and we don't know what countries would do in response to that. In addition to that, we also don't know what Trump is going to do with income taxes. We don't know if income taxes are going to get cut at all. We don't know if they're going to be potentially fully abolished, which really doesn't seem likely based off of the numbers that we have here. So that's why there's a lot of uncertainty. Yes, there could be worse inflation on certain items with the tariffs. There could also be a chance that inflation doesn't get worse on certain items. This is why I want you to be a financially savvy investor and not get caught up in the emotion, because I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care. I want you to understand money. I want you to understand how our economic system works. And I want you to understand how you can take better care of yourself and your family. That way, well, you can be a better provider. And in reality, at the end of the day, this is how our economic system works. There's a lot of emotional arguments, a lot of emotional things going on out there. That doesn't increase the value of your bank account, okay? You want to understand how money works. That way you can be a better investor. That way you can take better care of yourself and your family. And that starts with number one, not spending all of your money. That means you take the money that you earn from your job, you don't spend all of it, you save some money, and you put some money aside to invest. Now, if you have credit card debt, that's the first thing you got to worry about. You got to pay off the credit card debt first. If you don't have any emergency savings, you also got to take care of that. But after that, you got to stop spending all of your money so you have some money to save and invest.
And they normally say too, right? Like debt it's a lot of times it's an issue with the spending and not even the income
If you
itself.
don't have any money to save and invest, you should not be worried about tariffs right now. The first thing you got to do is figure out how you can take care of your house. You got to figure out how you can have some money to save, have some money to invest, and not spend all of your money. Then, once you have money to invest, now you figure out how you can start investing. And you got to figure out the right strategy for you. Maybe you just invest your money into the S&P 500. Maybe you look for more advanced investments. You look for individual stocks.
Yeah, because you know inflation is not slowing down.
It doesn't really matter what you do, but the key is you got to put money aside to invest and then actually invest it. That way, in addition to you working to make money, your money's also working to make money, because at the end of the day, it is up to you to take care of your house, and the person in the White House is not going to take care of your house. That's why this is so important. You got to get your own financial education right, not get caught up in the emotions. But once you understand this, that's when you can start understanding what's happening in the economy. That way you can find more unique investment opportunities for you. Again, I'll be keeping you posted here on this channel, and also my team at
Man, that's
Media.
crazy. Man, WVid. Man, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click this next vid on the screen, man. You won't want to miss